At 6 minutes past 10, the journalist Rod Liddle has sparked controversy after he said he wants to become disabled. This is a columnist for The Sun. He says being disabled is incredibly fashionable and says he's not surprised as, quote, not only do you get money from the government and don't have to go to work, but if you play your cards right, you might get one of those badges which lets you park wherever you want. Rod's on the line with us now. Good morning to you, Rod.
Hiya, mate. How you doing?
Very offensive, this, is it not?
Pardon? Sorry, say again?
Is this not offensive? You say being disabled is incredibly fashionable?
If it merely consisted of the lines you'd read out, then yes, of course it would be offensive.
What did you say?
But it didn't consist of that, did it? What I was talking about was the enormous rise in the number of people who claim to be disabled when they're plainly not disabled. I wasn't actually having a go at disabled people. I was having a go at people who were pretending to be disabled, who are doing as much a disservice to the disabled community as they are to, the rest of us who aren't disabled. I mean, there's been an enormous increase in the number of people claiming to be disabled in the last 10 years. It's doubled in the last 10 years for those people who are claiming incapacity or invalidity benefits. And there have been various estimates, it depends who you believe, that something like 4 out of 5 of the people who are claiming various of these benefits are perfectly capable of working. So there's been a huge increase, and we need to know where it comes from.
I'm reading...
and that's why I was being a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I'm reading from the column. You say, my New Year's resolution for 2012 was to become disabled. Nothing too serious, maybe just a bit of bad back, or one of those newly invented illnesses which make you a bit peaky for decades, fibromyalgia or ME.
Yeah.
What about people who have ME? How do you think they'll feel about that?
I think one of the reasons, my suspicion is, and I don't have any science to support this, but my guess is that one of the reasons that the number of people claiming to be disabled has gone up so swiftly in the last 10 and particularly 20 years is that there are now two very vaguely defined illnesses, and both of them are vaguely defined, which people can claim to have. Whether or not they have them or not is a different issue, and that's fibromyalgia and ME.
Monica Wilson from Disability Action. Morning, Monica.
Morning, Stephen.
What do you think?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think Rod really hasn't got the facts right, because if he looks at the Department for Work and Pensions survey using the General Household Survey, what happened was the increase in the prevalence of disability was between the mid-70s and the mid-90s, and that actually that figure is falling at the minute. I think the other thing is that, somebody's got something wrong if we believe Rod, because, the fraud level for all the disability benefits is much, much lower than it is for others. But the other thing is about this kind of definition of disability. That's very broad, and you have to get the balance between is it a medical definition or is it a social or is it a social model of disability? Sorry, I got thrown there by the phone ringing. I think, but for me, the real issue here is the power that Rod has in his hands, because there are real big increases in the rates of hate crime and aggression towards people with disabilities. And I think people have to be very careful of the power that they have, because most disabled people have no power.
Yeah, I'm sure if there are rises in hate crimes against disabled people, that's an appalling thing, but it shouldn't stop you pointing out, or shouldn't stop someone pointing out, that the fraudulent claiming of disability and incapacity benefits is a problem, and a problem for the country, and has been for a long time. Yeah, I take your point that the biggest rise was between the 70s and the 90s. That's undoubtedly correct. And also in the last 2 or 3 years, both the last Labour government and the current government have tried to address this issue, which is why, of course, it came about that I was writing about it, because of a complaint from a government minister talking about fraudulent claims of disability benefit. But I still don't think that that negates the fact that there is a problem there and it needs to be dealt with. Undoubtedly, there are other problems within society which we also need to deal with, but that doesn't obviate the need to deal with this one itself.
Right. Let's start with a few things. I think the first thing is that nobody who has a disability is saying there shouldn't be any review and change to welfare reform. What we're saying is that we need to look very seriously at the effects that has on disabled people. I mean, what the government should be doing, for example, is putting greater resources into finding employment for people with disabilities, because they're 4 times more likely to be unemployed.
I agree with that.
Yeah, if you just let me finish for a wee minute. Finding ways to help people to upskill, because disabled people are twice as likely to have no qualifications than non-disabled people. I think the other thing you need to think about, Rod, is I don't think you can have disability for a month. I think you actually have it for your whole life. So I've been very fashionable for over 50 years, if I take your descriptions. And I think that really is, I've got a thick skin. I don't think that didn't personally wound me. But I think there are a lot of people with diseases and disabilities and long-term conditions that have been hurt by what you said, and, whose self-confidence isn't very high anyway, and it's now been completely knocked. And I think, what you need to do is think about how you portray us as disabled people.
Here's David this morning on line 1. Sorry, Rod. Morning to you, David.
Morning, Stephen.
You want to speak to Rod Liddle? Go ahead.
Steve, I just wanted to say to Rod there, he's tying us all with a one brush. I was diagnosed with this fibromyalgia a few years ago. I had serious head injuries in 2001, in a wheelchair, on crutches, basically, for about 3 years after that, after I fought the battle to get out of the wheelchair. I actually graduated last year at Queen's with an honours degree. I don't get DLA. I got the bus 30 miles every morning, and you the debate last week about the bus. I get onto a bus carrying a computer and a school bag and my lunch, because I had to take my lunch with me. I couldn't go for lunch anywhere. I had to have it because I couldn't walk. And I got off at the Armour Bridge and I walked to Chlorine Gardens on a pair of crutches, and I didn't get DLA.
He's called ME, what you have. Rod can speak for himself, but he's called it in his column. And fibromyalgia, I can't say it for goodness sake. You know what I mean? Newly invented.
Fibromyalgia, yeah.
A newly invented illness.
Well, it is.
And nothing too serious.
Well, I didn't say it was nothing too serious. I said it was new. I said that the illness which I wanted to have was nothing too serious. And then I also talked about fibromyalgia and ME.
What do you mean, Rod, by invented?
Well, because this didn't exist 25, 30 years ago. The first references to fibromyalgia are in the last 20 to 30 years. Chronic fatigue syndrome was around, I think it was first mentioned, that's ME, I suppose you would call it now, in 1987. There were occasional references to something which might have been a bit like ME back in the 30s and 40s. But there was no actual definition for this illness, and there is no clear definition for what either of these illnesses are today. It's a much more complex subject than probably we have time to talk about here. But there is no clear cause of either of these illnesses, and there is no agreed cause, and there is no agreed treatment.
How do you feel about that, David?
I can understand in a way where he's coming from, because I go to places and people would see me on crutches, or people would see me hobbling, or I'm in pain all the time because I choose mainly not to take painkillers, because the morphine that you take, it's going to shorten your life. And indeed, I tolerate the pain, and it is horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And people say, "Oh, I've got that. Oh, I've got fibromyalgia. Oh, my doctor says it's really, I shouldn't do this." Get off your ass and get on with it. Tolerate the pain and get on with it, and stop relying on the state to fund every part of everybody's lifestyle.
I think that's absolutely right. And to take the earlier point from the lady who's disabled and speaking on behalf of a disablement group, I think she was saying that other people might be hurt by what I said, but they wouldn't be hurt if they're disabled. I mean, my piece was simply about people who are pretending to be disabled who are not. And there is clearly been a large increase in that number. You cannot get away from it.
Rod, can I come in here? I think you got to think that 50 years ago, people weren't talking about diabetes. People didn't used to talk about epilepsy.
Forgive me, they did talk about diabetes 50 years ago. They were talking about diabetes 80, 90 years ago. And it's something which has a clear cause and which you can scientifically define and which you can scientifically treat. So they were talking about it. That's just plainly wrong.
No, well, I think we can both accuse each other of being wrong. I certainly am clear.
But you are on that issue. Diabetes was around 50 years ago, I know, because my grandfather had it.
Right, but it's like ME and fibromyalgia. It wasn't generally accepted and wasn't seen as kind of the deserving disabled people. And I think that's part of what you're talking about.
Okay, let me bring in Andy this morning.
Sorry, can I just finish? What you're talking about is quite simply this. I said, you said disabled people wouldn't be hurt by this. I think you're wrong.
Just to clear up the one allegation of wrongness, all forms of diabetes have been treatable since insulin became available in 1921. So there was already a treatment for insulin in 1921, and it was very well known. So you were absolutely wrong about diabetes.
I might have been.
Let's just be clear about that.
In terms of the year, but the principle is the same, and the principle is this. It is.
Well, no, the principle isn't the same because it's got a clear definition and a clear way of treating it. That's my whole point.
It would help me, right? Okay, I'm very happy to listen to you, but I think you need to listen to me as well. I think that's only fair and just, right?
But you made something up.
Right. What the issue is here is very simple, and I'll go back to what my core issue was, is that the power is in your hands. You write and people read. People believe, whatever the intention of your article, people believe that you may mean every word that you're saying. I would like to start with saying nobody wants or should want to be disabled. It isn't for a month. It's for much longer than that. Disability is defined as permanent. And I think that the indignity that people face from having to deal every day with people making innuendo about their abilities or lack of abilities, about whether they're living on benefits rightly or wrongly, whether people are deserving or undeserving. And I think all of those things are increasing.
Okay.
And I believe they're causing increase in hate crimes.
Let's bring in Andy this morning. Morning, Andy.
Hello, Stephen. Stephen, I just want to say I agree in part with what Rod's saying, because you know and I know that in Northern Ireland we have the highest number of people on DLA per head of population of anywhere in the UK.
Well, it's 1 in 10 in Northern Ireland. It's around 180,000 people, and there were also over 100,000 on what was called incapacity benefit.
Stephen, you know and I know that, where did all these people suddenly come from? That's what Andy's saying.
Exactly.
I mean, people are sponging off the system. That's basically what it is, and they're just taking advantage of all these new... I'm not saying people who are genuinely disabled or whatever, I have great sympathy for, and we all have. But it's the people who are using the system, saying we have this, that, and the other, who should be targeted, and that's the problem in the whole.
Andy, thank you, Norma. Morning, Norma.
Good morning, Stephen. I'm sitting here this morning in a chair. I can't make myself a cup of tea. My back is killing me. I have arthritis of the spine, degeneration of the discs, and my hips going. I can't make a cup of tea. I would give anything to be all right and to go out on that main street in Larne and walk up it. Anything to be all right. I don't want to be like this. Doped with morphine and painkillers. So I don't know what that man's talking about, for I would give anything to be out and about.
I'm really sorry. Do you not understand that I am not having a go at people who are disabled? I'm having a go at people who are feigning disability in order to claim money from the state, and that the figures have increased massively over the last 20 or 30 years, but also over the last 10 years, and that there are two possibilities. One is that suddenly a large number of people have somehow become disabled, which seems to me to be pushing it, or there's a lot more people taking advantage of what was at one point a very lax system for handing out incapacity and disability benefit.
Well,
I'm not talking about people who are in pain and cannot move. I'm really sorry if you think I am, but you have to read the piece.
Tell me what life is like for you, Norma.
Money. Pardon?
Tell me what life is like for you.
Life is sitting in an apartment, not being able to make a cup of tea, not being able to go out. My ex-husband had to come down and make me tea this morning. I've got a little dog. He has to walk him. I would give any... Life is hell.
And what difference does...
TV screen.
What difference does DLA make to you, Norma?
Well, I can pay a cleaner. I can pay somebody to go and get me shopping, my groceries. It doesn't make an awful lot, but for £256 a month, which I'm glad of.
You've made a very, very powerful contribution to this programme today, Norma, and thank you very, very much. Rod, thank you as well. And Monica, always nice to talk to you.